This press conference this morning, Lawless Britain, is the beginning of a 6-week campaign. We will, over the course of the next few weeks, highlight individual areas, go into much more detail, and we'll also have one or two quite well-known people appearing on our stages, coming sort of out of obscurity, political obscurity, to support what we are trying to do. One of the things I think that has sort of really led to deterioration of trust in politics are successive Home Secretaries telling us crime is falling. You hear it every year. Crime is falling. So please don't worry your poor little heads. Well, that's because the crime survey for England and Wales is based on completely false data. If you look at police recorded crime, which is what we've done for our research all through this, you can see that actually there are some significant rises in crimes of all kinds, particularly crimes against the person. We're actually facing, in many parts of our country, nothing short of societal collapse. If people are scared to go out of the shops, scared to let their kids out, that is a society that is degrading, and it's happening very, very rapidly. I'm astonished that there has been so little debate in Westminster amongst our political classes on this issue, because I'm sure they must, in their MPs' inboxes, get members of the public telling them just how grim things really are. Sarah mentioned the word respect. Respect for those in uniform has declined massively. The criminals don't particularly respect the police and can act in many cases with total impunity. Just as worrying, if not more so, is huge numbers of law-abiding, tax-paying Britons have also lost respect for the police, but in a different way. The idea, the concept that we're living in a system of two-tier policing and two-tier justice under two-tier care has really taken hold. You only have to look at the reluctance to prosecute those violent thugs in Manchester Airport who beat up those police officers. It took months and months and months for any prosecution to be brought, and I suspect the reason that it happened is because Reform said if they didn't, we would take out our own private prosecution. And yet, Lucy Connolly and others like that, and she received a 31-month prison sentence, albeit for saying something deeply intemperate and wrong, of that there's no question. Her case was dealt with in days. So we are in a real, real mess. Just looking and thinking about London for today, London, 1 in 3 people at some point have been subject to phone theft. It's almost unbelievable. Almost unbelievable. The number's so big. Had a case in my family a few months ago. Somebody at Victoria Station, a relation of mine, punched, phone taken, but they had a tracker on the phone, so we could see exactly where the phone was going. And I assume it wasn't just one phone, there would have been a couple of hundred phones. We even gave the police the address of the house in southern Buckinghamshire where the phones had gone to. The police took no action whatsoever. And you can just walk down Oxford Street, Regent Street any day, and you can see the moped gangs running amok with hardly anybody ever being arrested. I worked in the 1980s for a couple of Wall Street houses in my days in the commodity markets, and I remember if you left a restaurant in New York at 8, 9 o'clock at night, you made sure the taxi was there, waiting, the guy gave you a wave, so that you literally spent sort of 5 or 10 seconds leaving the venue. So bad was street crime in New York. And yet, 10 years later, you could wander about New York at 2 o'clock in the morning, being really unconcerned that anything would go wrong. And this, of course, was the inspirational mayor, Rudy Giuliani, who followed the broken windows theory, which is if you deal with crime, if you deal with graffiti, you deal with litter, you deal with things at the ground level, that actually that helps stop crime going further up. And we're doing the opposite. You know, since 2014, you can shoplift up to £200 and frankly, nothing is going to happen to you. Layla would not have been prosecuting them. Sarah would not have been hearing the cases. We just accepted that shoplifting is okay. Drugs being smoked openly on the streets, that apparently is just okay. So what we've done is we've raised the level of what we now deem to be acceptable behaviour. And of course, what happens if you go lax on it? Well, of course, crime moves up to fill that gap and then moves on further still. So I want to be absolutely clear at the start of this 6-week campaign that Reform will be the toughest party on law and order and on crime that this country has ever seen. We will aim to cut crime by half in the first 5 years of a Reform government. We will take back control of our streets. We will take back control of our courts, of our prisons. And if you're a criminal, I am putting you on notice today that from 2029, or whenever that may be, either you obey the law or you will face very serious justice. Now, in terms of policy proposals, I'm going to reiterate the point. Zero tolerance policing. Every single shoplifting offence, however small, should be prosecuted. Every single mobile phone that is stolen, if we can track it, we need to go to the addresses and find out who these people are. Stop and search. Stop and search in areas where knife crime is prevalent will go on up until saturation point, until we drive knives off the street. And believe me, this is a policy that I know from my campaigning recently around the country, supported by people right across the political spectrum. And if we have to build more knife arches at the entrance to train stations or bus stations or whatever it may be, then we will do it. Fast-track arrest, we believe that is very, very important. And if we have to open pop-up custody suites and centres around the country, we'll do so, because many police stations not just closing in huge numbers around the country, but many police stations, including a local one in Clacton, have lost their custody suites. So we believe that fast-track arrest, holding people, is right. And perhaps the biggest pledge that we would make today is to say 30,000 more police over a 5-year term of a parliament. And we will scrap all diversity, equality and inclusion roles, and we will aim for a higher and physically tougher standard of police officer on our streets. I think that if criminals slightly fear the police, that is a desirable place for us to be as a society. I knew a chap who'd served in the Grenadier Guards. He'd served in Afghanistan. He'd done 2 tours, one of them a very, very brutal tour. He came back in his late 20s, applied to join a county police force, but was rejected. Rejected. A fit young guy, an army sergeant who'd done service, told to come back next year because they were having trouble with their quotas. Enough. Enough of all that rubbish. And in fact, on that theme, we would look very much to go to people who have served in the armed forces, who we think would make ideal police officers. Fast-track courts. We have a massive backlog in all levels of court cases in this country, partly down to the repeated lockdowns that we went through, and partly down to the fact that actually, astonishingly, so many magistrates' courts have closed since 2010. Up to 50% of magistrates' courts closed since David Cameron came to power in 2010. So we would aim to reopen those magistrates' courts, and we would reach out to former and retired magistrates and say to them, please, we want you to come back to this job. Help us in this national effort to catch up with the backlog and to start dishing out proper justice. And of course, we know that 10% of criminals commit 50% of all crime in this country. So it won't surprise you to know that we are not supporters of the Labour government policy of early release for offenders. Weren't some of those scenes outside our prisons deplorable? People being let out, being met by Lamborghinis, Rolls Royces, champagne being opened, and the reoffending rates have been truly horrific. No, we take a very, very different view, and we do absolutely think that if anyone commits more than 3, and whilst of course prison should aim initially to rehabilitate and to educate, if people are convicted of more than 3 serious offences, well, frankly, we think that puts them on a course towards life imprisonment. And the same goes for sexual offenders and violent offenders. We believe they should serve their full term, not just as punishment, but to keep the rest of society safe. So we're very strong on that. Yeah, you know, commit the crime, pay the price, be you a shoplifter, be you someone carrying a knife, whatever it may be. And we would look to free up tens of thousands, up to 30,000 prison places. We will build Nightingale prisons. You remember the Nightingale hospitals? Within 72 hours, hospitals were built. And we'll work with private contractors, but we'll want to use the logistical skills that exist in the army and our armed forces to make this happen. We can build up to 12,000 prison places, and we can do so actually in short order. And there are 10,400 foreign prisoners in our prisons, has been mentioned on this platform already. They will be deported back to their home countries. And I think I'm in conversation with Edi Rama from Albania, and I think he's rather agreed that he will take back all of the Albanian prisoners in this country, which is rather a good thing. And yes, we do think dynamic prison places overseas work. You've seen America doing it recently, but the Scandinavian countries are doing it too. You know, Estonia is quite prepared to take prisoners from this country. And in fact, the Labour government has had those conversations already, but of course, nothing has come to fruition. Denmark sends off prisoners to Kosovo and places like that. I mean, it is quite astonishing that to keep a prisoner in a British prison costs nearly £52,000 a year. You could send a child to Eton for that price. So if we can send some of our worst violent criminals overseas to serve their terms, then yes. And if that means that Ian Huntley goes to El Salvador, well, our attitude is so be it. So we're serious about it, but we also think we can cut the costs of running prisons significantly. It seems that everything the British state does, because it's so highly bureaucratised, costs just so much more than everywhere else. France manages to run its prisoners for an average of £40,000 a year, not the £52,000 a year that it is here. To repeat, today is just the start of this Law and Order campaign, which will go on over the course of the next 6 weeks. I genuinely think that by standing up, by saying these things, we're striking a chord with the vast majority of the British public. There is nothing left-wing or right-wing about desperately wanting for our society, for our streets, to be a hell of a lot safer than they are today. And as with everything that we do, when we say it, we actually mean it. How about that? Thank you.